Welcome to Sportex Leaders. And I'm joined by Kutsi Mzombe, CEO of Accelerate Sport. Let's start off by describing to us what Accelerate Sport does and your day to day role at the agency. Welcome, Kutsi.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor. I feel special. Just to give you a brief understanding of Accelerate Sport, I think it's a joke that we always make internally. We identify ourselves as sports doctors. I think everyone loves sports. I can speak for a number of people, but we were just a bunch of people who the company was founded by Gary Grant, who's unfortunately late uh, during the COVID time frame. But he, along with Sengezi Nayo, were people from Saru backgrounds, during that professionalization era. They're the ones who were, you know, um, leading the charge in terms of the commercial outlook of South African rugby from amateur to professionalization. And I think afterwards they decided to start their own company, Accelerate Sport, with a specific aim and strategy to work with the niche sports outside what would call the big three. So we do everything outside rugby, cricket, and football, just as a out of genuine strategy because we found that there's more opportunities to work within the niche sports and in terms of just a general skills, makeup, we've got people with the legal backgrounds, that's myself included, accounting, commercial, creatives, as long as just inventing. So pretty much what we do at Accelerate Sport is we found joy in working with national federations, naming the few from top of my head, there's Squash South Africa, Surfing South Africa, Netball South Africa, which is now being termed as a Big Four sporting federation, amongst others, and each client, of course, has just got its own day-to-day needs and wants. So for just as an example, right now, in terms of netball, we're about to get ready for the Spa Challenge where we're hosting Malawi end of the month. And within that, what we're quite busy working with is that we're working with our sponsorship matrix, breaking down, we've got at least 13 partners that we have on board. What are their rights? What are the expectations? What branding do we need to put in place? Where and we have to go and get approvals from the clients. You have to redo certain stuff, and you have to make sure everything is ready. So that's one example. But then when you look into, for example, Squash South Africa, that's a different client. For example, there we're busy. We just finished one of the biggest sporting events called the Growth Point Nationals, and there we're just doing reports, which is the fun part, which I'm sure not too many people enjoy, having to write to the partners, the ROIs, how everything went by, the closeout reports, you name it. So in a nutshell, that's pretty much what we'll be doing, from a day to day, and we love it, enjoy it.
No, great. It seems like the agency has got his hands quite full there with the amount of activations that is being appointed for. So you've mentioned squash. Squash has been a client of yours since 2018. How has your
Yeah.
agency's approach to promoting squash in South Africa evolved over that time, considering factors like viewership trends and sponsorship opportunities for the sport itself?
Good question. So I think I'd say squash. We started in 2018, and as one would know that after 2018, we got into 2019, 2020, where there was the unfortunate pandemic. So a few of the plans, we had to shelve them, some of them throw them in the bin, unfortunately. But one thing I can tell you is that in terms of our squash strategy, squash is a niche sport. I don't think many people know it. As a matter of fact, many people confuse it with badminton, not to mention the new paddle that has come, which hasn't helped our cause. So the main issue here was having what we call a short-term plan, a medium plan, and a long-term plan. And there's always a golden thread as to something that's consistent across all those terms, And one of them was for us to build a strong foundation. Being it, let's spread the popularity and promote the sport in South Africa. As you know, squash is played in squash clubs, in country clubs, and not too many people are exposed to it. And it also has this association as being a somewhat an elitist sport, if I must say, which is somewhat true, but not entirely accurate to that matter. So what we've done is in terms of the strategy for squash was that we're going to go through 5 years of pain. That 5 years of pain is doing something consistently all the time and doing it well, and hoping that in year 6 we're going to start getting actual return of that investment, even though some of the investments are coming out incrementally, which is a bonus, but it's not what we're seeking for. So what we've done in terms of the strategy is just to focus on having a consistent calendar. It sounds simple, but it's not. Having a consistent calendar from A to Z, that is important if you want to get credibility from your broadcasters. In South Africa, would say SABC or SuperSport. It's not that easy to get a broadcaster without one, as well as without a guaranteed audience. You'd think that they'll help you grow the audience, but as a matter of fact, you need to go there with an audience already and say, here's what we've achieved consistently in the past 3 to 5 years, and it's time for the next step, and you guys will be able to get your commercial value. Because it's also important for them to also have, because they've got airtime value. So what we have done in terms of our viewership as well as our strategy, we've focused on having consistent amateur events, consistent development events, consistent national events, and having a consistent community social responsibility events across all those platforms. So what we've done, we've dusted an asset that they had already. The glass court weighs about 10 tons. We put it there in the middle of the waterfront, sat the mall for 2 weeks, and we've got shoppers who are just walking around, because remember, Growth Point are one of our sponsors, and the waterfront is partly owned by Growth Point. So we've managed to use the utility of that relationship to grow the sport. So you've got people who didn't know anything about squash walking past and asking the right questions, seeing the exhibition of top flight matches that I come across. But whilst we're doing that, we've also introduced the juniors to be part of it, from under 15, under 17, under 19, so that we're growing our talent. Because remember, when they play overseas, they play to a glass court. And remember, in South Africa, that's the only glass court we have. I think there's a second one now, but believe it or not, we only had one glass court. So we've managed to, and we live stream all the matches that are being played, and we've managed to grow our audience incrementally, such that there was a time when our numbers were 200,000 consistently, but now for the second year in a row, we've managed to go past the 1 million mark, mark. So we are doing well, but in terms of being specific to the demographics as to who's actually watching squash, it's your typical, we want to grow to the younger base, but at the moment, it's usually 25 and above. And in terms of the locations, because we've consistently been doing stuff in Cape Town, because City of Cape Town has been a very reliant partner, there's more following in Cape Town, followed by Gauteng, and then followed by Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha. And the main reason why Port Elizabeth is coming in the fray is that the consistent champions are coming from PE. So that explains that. So we are trying to grow to the younger base, and we are also trying to grow in terms of nationally. But one thing we know that we need to do right for it to grow broadly nationally is for us to start having consistent national team test matches in the country, because nationalism does well. Look at Dreykus with UFC. He's representing South Africa, and that's what binds people. So now that squash is part of the Olympics moving forward, it's a prerogative for Squash South Africa to start hosting national test teams, which they've done in the past, but now with higher emphasis within the promotional value. So we're hoping that the next 3 years are going to be impactful and positive for the growth of squash in South Africa, if that helps.
No, great. Moving from squash to surfing, you also, as you've mentioned, manages the process of sponsorship solicitation for Netball South Africa, and you have managed sponsorships for ultra triathlon as well. Now, in short, what would be the process be for identifying potential sponsors? And even with, if you look at your City Surf series, which
Yeah,
incidentally, you as an agency, you own that property. And let's just take
mm,
us through the process of identifying sponsorship for perhaps like the City Surf series, netball, and
sure.
ultra triathlon, respectively.
Okay, no problem. So in general, I mean, there's different ways in which people seek sponsorship and strategies. But for us, what has worked quite well was just to, there's a philosophy called follow the common sense. You know, what makes common sense? And that's where you need to don't reinvent the wheel. So to start off, you look at your asset or your product or your platform, where let's say it's surfing, it's ultra, or it's even netball, and say, okay, this is what we have, this is what our asset, and this is its elements. This is what we're working with. And then you ask yourself, who speaks the same values? Who speaks the same language is what we are trying to achieve. So I think netball makes it quite an easy example for me here. For example, I can even speak in reference to the current partners that we have on board. Ask yourself who speak the same language. From the top of your head, I think you can just say SPA. SPA speaks the same language because they are very, very proud women partners, of which netball here is a women dominated sporting code. And then you also go to the same next question to say, you know, who wants to make positive impact and who's intentional about wanting to make positive impact. And now, if you look into the netball ecosystems in terms of that, you come across, you've got Telkom. Telkom have been making the same sort of noises, and they really want to make positive impact in South Africa. And you can see in what they're doing in terms of the CSI. You know, they're quite consistent in everything they do. So you put your right SPA and your right Telkom on the side, and then you also ask yourself, is is a property owner or is a right owner in what I'm trying to sell? You know, who sees business value interest in here? Like, are there any budget alleviating partners that I could look at who could also see positivity in that? You can then write Southern Sun Group of Hotels, right? Because the hotel group and anyone is going to need accommodation. So now you're creating a list of based on those questions, and then you ask yourself, that being said, who has financial capacity? It's one thing for people to want to do that, but it's also we need to be pragmatic and realistic. Who has financial capacity? Then you can cross off, you know, based on that long list you have drawn. And once you're done, you're left with a smaller list, and then you ask yourself, who would netball want to be associated with out of all this? What would make sense for netball? What would make sense for surfing? What would make sense for ultra? And once you draw this list, you see you're narrowing down the search, but you can even decide to go a step further. You know, you can go, I mean, there's other ways in which you do. We also use data through algorithms.
That was
Sure.
Kutsi Nzembe, CEO of Accelerate Sport. Thank you for your time, which is very much appreciated. That is where we would leave it for now. Thank you for watching SportX channel, which is hosted on TalkX TV. Until next time.